This video is to show the evaluation of media, how the bacteria or organisms they grow on different kinds of media. The first media, which over here is nutrient broth. This is what nutrient broth looks like. This is glucose salts, and this is BHI, which is brain heart infusion. So I just want to show what these medias look like. So you have on the far right nutrient broth, glucose salt, and BHI. And I'm going to inoculate these medias with different organisms. The organisms would be E. coli, Enterococcus faecalis, Staphylococcus aureus. And as you can see, there are 4 tubes for each media, and one of them is a control. So you have BHI, you have nutrient broth, and glucose salts. And for sake of the time constraint, I'm going to label all these tubes, and I'm going to show that after I have labeled it. Now I have already labeled my tubes for evaluation of media, and I'm going to show you one. So this is nutrient broth, today's date 8/13, GG my initials, and the organism I'm going to inoculate with, which is E. coli. And again, you can write 24 or 48 hours, but if you have the date on, it would be fine. I've already flamed and cooled down my inoculation loop, and the very first bacteria I'm going to inoculate with is E. coli. And that is what I'm going to use for nutrient broth, for glucose salts, and for brain heart infusion agar. So I'm going to show you for one, and then it is basically the same process. And every time you open a tube and you use the inoculation loop, you must flame it before you use the inoculation loop. Even though you are going to inoculate the same organism in different medias, the best practice is to always flame it even between the tubes. And this is already done, so I'm going to place it in the back of the rack and then flame the loop. And I'm going to repeat this process for glucose salts and for BHI. This is a video to show E. faecalis inoculation and Enterococcus faecalis inoculation for BHI, glucose salts, and nutrient broth. Again, flame your inoculation loop, and I try to flame it 2 times. Let it cool down. And that sizzle is because it wasn't completely cooled down. But it's still okay if you're working with broth, because you have plenty of bacteria, and even if some of the bacteria dies, you still have more bacteria. So again, for the sake of time, I'm going to show first inoculation, which is for the nutrient broth. And labeling is very important for this kind of experiment or any microbiology experiment. And now I'll perform the inoculations for the other broths. Now this is inoculation of Staph aureus. Now this is inoculation of Staph aureus, Staphylococcus aureus, for the evaluation of media. And again, for time's sake, I'm going to show just one inoculation. So this would be for nutrient broth, and I'm going to repeat the process for BHI and glucose salts.
Hi everyone, today we are going to be looking at our results from the evaluation of media experiment. As a quick refresher, we used 3 different media broths. We used a nutrient broth, we used brain heart infusion, and we used glucose salts. And for organisms, we used E. coli, Staph aureus, and E. faecalis. So first, let's start with our nutrient broth media. I've got E. coli on the right, and then a control tube of nutrient broth on the left. We can see that there is growth. I can't see my hand beyond the growth, whereas I can on the control tube. Next, we have our E. faecalis on the right and our control tube on the left. And in this tube, we don't see any growth. Then finally, here is Staph aureus on the right and the control nutrient broth on the left. And once again, we don't see any growth. Moving on to the brain heart infusion, this is our E. coli on the right and our control tube on the left. We can see thick growth throughout the media, and once again, I can't see my hand through the turbidity. Now this is our E. faecalis on the right in the brain heart infusion, and then our control tube on the left. In this one we can see growth. And then finally here is the Staph aureus in the brain heart infusion. Moving on to the glucose salt media, I've got my E. coli on the right and then a control tube on the left. Now this we can see my hand through, however we can also determine that there is growth. It's just not quite as turbid as those other mixtures. Next we have E. faecalis on the right and the control tube on the left. In this we don't see any growth. And then finally we have our Staph aureus on the right and our control tube of glucose salts on the left. And initially there is no turbidity in the Staph aureus tube, so there's no growth. However, there is a bit of a sediment that you can kind of see there. And then if I mix it up a little, you can see them slowly drift back down.